Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Watson, and I'm the Communications Supervisor at Tualatin Valley Water District. It's my pleasure today to kick this thing off and want to start by thanking you all for taking time out of your day to join this conversation. This is a follow-up to a podcast that was on Inside Washington County. We'll post up the link for that if you want to see that, but we were invited to participate on that, and we felt like that was a one-way conversation and an interview format, and that we wanted to open this up to our customers and our regional partners to talk more about the future of water in Washington County, because the future of water affects all of us, and as you'll learn here in the presentation, there are a lot of partnerships at play in Washington County. If you could go to the next slide. We again just want to thank you for taking time to participate in this. If you are new to these kind of virtual events, we want to familiarize you with the tool that we're using, which is Microsoft Teams. And there is a little icon there that looks like a cartoon thought bubble with a question in it. If you click on that, if you're on a computer or a mobile device, you will be able to type in your questions. And we will get to those questions as we get to the Q&A part at the end after the brief presentation. And we just wanted to make sure you have a chance to ask anything that you would like to ask. And if we aren't able to answer it today at the end, we will get back to you in the future with that answer if we don't have the right experts on the line to address your question. Just as a general reminder, Tualatin Valley Water District is a government agency. We operate as a special district. We have one purpose, and that's to provide drinking water. But as such, we do operate in an inclusive and non-discriminatory manner. So when you type in your questions, if there is any profanity or anything in there that would be offensive, we will rewrite that when we read the question. But we just ask that you keep that in mind when you write your comments. And also that you understand we are recording this for replay for customers who aren't able to attend. Next slide. So we're going to go ahead and get started here with the presentation portion. Today we're going to have three presenters. We have the Tualatin Valley Water District Chief Executive Officer, Tom Hickman. And then we have the Willamette Water Supply Program Director, Dave Kraska. And then we have our Water Resources Division Manager, Joel Kerry. They will be doing the information session, and then we will follow that up with a Q&A. And we did invite a number of our water partners throughout the region to join us on this call. So if you are here as a customer from another entity, there's a good chance we'll be able to have your provider answer any questions that you may have. So if you could include that when you type in your questions, that'd be really helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Tom. Please kick us off here. Again, this is TVWD's Chief Executive Officer, Tom Hickman.
Thank you, Andrea. Much appreciated. And there's a little bit about me on the slide, but I've been in this position for a little over 2 years and came from the city of Bend there as the engineering director overseeing all of their water and sewer transportation infrastructure projects. I was also a consultant in my former life and happy to be here now. So I also want to recognize we have a couple of commissioners on the call here. We have Commissioner Sanders and Commissioner Doan. So they are here and listening as well to any comments, questions, or concerns you may have. So let's get started on to the next slide, please. So we rely on a number of sources of water. So the one you're going to hear about a little bit about today is the new Willamette water supply. We're going to be talking about that, but we also rely on reservoirs and reservoir storage, both tanks, and we certainly rely on the JWC Hag Lake source, so that's another one of our sites that we rely on. We also use aquifer storage and recovery. This is where we take water when there's excess water available. We put it into the ground, and then we extract it during times of need. So that's another source of water that we have. We have the regional partnerships that we work on. So this is what I'm referring to here is what we call the JWC, or the Joint Water Commission. working with Hillsborough and many other partners on that to supply us water through Hag Lake. And then we also rely on water conservation, the end user, you. We rely on you to be using the water wisely, efficiently, so that we have a resource that can last us sustainably long into the future. Next slide, please. So we do have risks that threaten our supply. So earthquakes, which is actually one of the major reasons why we embarked on the Willamette water supply project. This is going to be seismically resilient as a main source, so that in a Cascadia subduction event, we should be able to continue to provide water after that event occurs. But it still remains a risk, but we make necessary investments to try to mitigate that risk. Drought, certainly up until, a week ago, we were facing some pretty dire situations in terms of drought in, I shouldn't use the word dire, but we had a tough year, and we didn't get a lot of rainfall, and we certainly had to stretch our resources to make it through the summer. And it's always welcome to get the fall rains here and see that hopefully we can see a change and more rainfall in the future to fill those reservoirs back up. But that's something that we don't have a lot of control over. So climate change. We are seeing changes in terms of the precipitation, the amounts we get, and when we get it. So that makes it a little more challenging, and certainly is a risk to future supply. So we, again, are looking to diversify our sources and our portfolio of supply so that we can try to mitigate the risks of climate change. And then, of course, power outages and fires are also a risk. When I talk about fires, I'm talking about fires in our watersheds. Those actually pose a risk to our sources and to our facilities. And of course, power outages can impact our ability to pump or move water throughout the system. So we mitigate that through having emergency generators and other ways to have that backup power supply. Next slide, please. So how is the water system of the future financed? I mean, that's something we're asking all of all of our customers to help pay for this. And so how do we finance this? So the number one way we pay for everything we do is through our fees or our rates. We try to be, and our board tries to be very aware of the impacts to our customers when we make any adjustments to our fees and rates. But at the same time, we have a lot of critical investment needs that we're making, which we're going to be talking more about today. The biggest one, and the one that's stretching all of us financially right now in terms of us and our partners in terms of water system, is the Willamette Water Supply Project. We have three partners in that, Hillsborough and Beaverton, and they are paying their share of the system components and trying to make sure that we work that together. But there's an equivalent partnership with more partners through the Joint Water Commission, where everyone pays their fair share. And we have Nikki Iverson on the call today, that if there's questions about that, she can speak to those. Water rates recover the costs of delivering our water, the maintenance, and the constructing of system components, but they also pay for when we bond or when we get a loan, which we have done for some of these. They help back up those our repayment of those. So that's a critical step that our rates cover. And new water users, they pay system development charges, so they pay for as we expand facilities, they're paying for that expansion part of those facilities to cover their impacts on the system. And then one of the things that we are doing, or we have done, is we have received WIFIA loans, not just us, but our partners have as well. And the WIFIA loan is something that we get through the federal government. It's a very low interest loan, and we get to repay this over a very long period of time, 35 years. And so this becomes a generational investment, something that we're asking current generation plus future generations to help us pay for this very long-term water supply that will serve us far into the future. And then we have been increasing rates over the past decade to help us get the necessary revenue to pay for these loans and to pay for some of these costs up front as well. So this is all something we've been doing, and we'll talk more about how long this project's been going on, because this is something that's been planned for many, many years. Next slide, please. So you understand what the costs are, but most importantly, you want to understand, well, what are we doing to manage these costs? The expectation is we manage these costs so that we make sure that the impact is as small as it can be to all of you. We reduced, in this biennium budget that was recently adopted, we reduced our personnel services by 2.8%. That may not sound like a lot, but we actually run a fairly lean organization. So that is not something that, actually comes easily. It puts a great deal of workload on fewer people. But we realized we had to do all we could, and so we certainly did that. And we looked at doing that by delaying hiring certain positions, or actually not hiring at all some positions. We've deferred $50 million of infrastructure projects. So this was something we worked with our partners on. This was a big deal for all of us to make a very tough decision to say we would defer some investment in certain aspects of the Willamette project to make this a little more affordable, spread those costs out over a longer period of time so that we can reduce the rate impact to all of you. And then, as I mentioned, we've partnered with other cities, and we do this the more partners we can have, the more we can spread these costs out and lower that cost for each individual user. So we've done that and partnered with Hillsborough and Beaverton and talking to others to see how we can best spread out this cost within the Washington County area. Next slide, please. So what do we use your money for? So construction of the additional water supply, which I've mentioned, the repairs and replacements of aging infrastructure. That is something we have to continue to do. Pipes age, they don't last forever. And so we make these critical investments to make sure that we can keep delivering you water 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then purchased water. So this is something that we purchase water from the Portland Water Bureau, and we purchase water through, as I mentioned before, the JWC. So these are wholesale water purchases that we make to supply water to all of you. Next slide, please. There we go. All right. Partnerships result in better investments, and one of the partners we do is certainly with even those that aren't necessarily directly involved in this project. We partnered with Wilsonville and the Department of Transportation on the Kinsman Road project to make sure that at the end of the day, regardless of how you're paying for this, you again want us to be using your money wisely, which we take very seriously. We do not take that lightly. So where we can partner even with other entities to basically share the costs on the project in terms of a roadway or those kinds of things. So we do multiple upgrades with one project. We did this again with Washington County, and we'll be doing it again in the future. We did it on the 124th Avenue partnership, and then certainly on the South Hillsborough area pipeline. We coordinated with Newland to try to make sure that we were, again, working around what they wanted to achieve, lessening the impact to them and to us at the same time, and again, share the costs where we can. Next slide, please. So I believe at this point I'm turning this over to, or I will be turning it over to Dave. I'm not sure if I do that at this point. I mentioned the Joint Water Commission. Also, we have emergency interties and emergency pumping. We use what we call the flow and eddy trailers. There's a picture of those that we can do. We recently loaned those out down to Klamath, and then provide mutual aid in times of any crisis so that we can interconnect our systems and again try to keep everybody in their water supply. Next slide. All right, yes, that's the one I was looking for. So Dave Kraska, I am going to turn this over to our Willamette Water Supply Program Director, and he's going to talk to you a little more about what he's doing specifically with the Willamette Water Supply and where we're at in that and how he's managing costs on that project. Dave?
All right, thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, Tom, that slide surprised me as well. I came in a little early on this one. So anyways, here's a quick slide about me, what I do on the Willamette Water Supply Program. I'm the director of it. All these bullets talk about the various things I do. And the priorities of the program are right there: cost management, safety and risk management, and schedule completing on time. And what on time means, it means by mid-2026. And I have a slide on that in a little bit. So let's go to the next slide. So where did this all start? As Tom mentioned, started many years ago, and there's a long history even before this slide, but to keep it short, this started in 2011 with a study that completed in 2013 where TVWD selected the Willamette River after a multi-year technical study with public input. The graphic there on the right-hand side of the slide, it shows you the various alternatives that were considered. Starting from the top and working our way clockwise, groundwater wells, there was a new source or new supply that was considered to be developed kind of in the Salvie Island area. It would be a new groundwater supply for the district. Another option that was looked at is purchasing additional water from the city of Portland. The Mid-Willamette River was the third option that was considered, and then increasing storage at Hag Lake. That's basically an expansion of the Joint Water Commission system out in the Forest Grove area. So these four alternatives were considered and analyzed, and the Mid-Willamette River was the selected option for these reasons here listed on the left. Lower cost. So of these options that were considered, the Mid-Willamette River is the lower cost option for implementation. It's providing excellent water quality, as proven by the city of Wilsonville and city of Sherwood, that have been using this water source for 20 years now. At least the city of Wilsonville has, and it's proven the water quality received from their system has been excellent. It provides ownership. This going to the Willamette River, where TVWD has had water rights since the mid-70s, provides ownership of its supply, giving it additional control over not only the operation, but also the costs associated with that supply. It's a reliable supply, again, as proven from the decades of use in Wilsonville, And of these options that were considered for implementation, going to the Mid-Willamette River is actually the one that has the fewer environmental impacts. So for all those reasons, the board selected that as the option back in 2013. And then we went about implementing it, starting with creating a mission statement on the next slide here. There it is. So the mission statement guides pretty much everything that we do in the program. It's worth me repeating it here. It is to provide a cost-effective, reliable, and resilient water supply system by July 2026 that benefits current and future generations, the communities we serve, and supports a vibrant local economy. So pretty much everything we do on the program is guided by this mission statement. And as Tom presented, there are 3 partners in this project, the Tualatin Valley Water District, City of Hillsborough, and City of Beaverton. So next slide is about what is the Willamette Water Supply System. And here's a very brief and simple overview of it. The graphic on the right-hand side shows that we start with a water intake on the Willamette River down in the Wilsonville area, and we'll be building a new state-of-the-art water treatment plant in the Sherwood area. Connecting all of this to the distribution systems is more than 30 miles of large diameter transmission pipelines. And there's also another major feature is water storage. We're planning to have ultimately 2 15 million gallon water storage tanks in the Cooper Mountain area. Next slide, please. So with that broad overview of what is the overall system, I've got a few slides here to show you give you a little bit more realistic view, a tangible perspective on what each of these elements looks like. First off is the modified expanded intake co-located with the Willamette River Water Treatment Plant. One more click there, Joel. And you see the yellow flag there pop up. So if you go down to Wilsonville and to the water treatment plant park there, not right now, we're doing a lot of construction there, but in a little while we'll reopen the park. All the way down there toward the Willamette River is the raw water intake that it will be shared not only by the Willamette River Water Treatment Plant, but also by our system. So we'll have a single intake supporting both the Willamette River Water Treatment Plant that serves cities of Wilsonville and Sherwood, and the Willamette Water Supply System that will be providing water ultimately in 2026 to TVWD, Hillsborough, and Beaverton. So that's our intake on the Willamette River. Next slide. Then, as I mentioned, another major feature of the Willamette Water Supply System is our water treatment plant. On the left here is the Willamette River Water Treatment Plant, and as I explained, it's been in operation for about 20 years now, and the experience has been very successful. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We're building off of that experience of success. In what we're planning for in the future Willamette Water Supply System water treatment plant, there on the right-hand side, that shows our engineering graphic plan view of the overall system design. And so what we're doing is we're taking the success of the Willamette River Water Treatment Plant and building off of that, and also implementing some new technologies, new refinements that have been proven since that time in our system. So let's go to the next slide. And we talk about a multi-barrier water treatment plant. This chart here kind of explains what exactly we mean by that. On the left-hand side, we list out all of the constituents that might be in the raw water that we'll want to have handled by our water treatment plant, specifically turbidity and particles, pathogenic microorganisms, tastes and odors, trace organics, and emerging contaminants. And then each of the technologies that we have at the Willamette Water Supply System water treatment plant is intended to deal with each of those. So we have ballasted flocculation, followed by intermediate ozonation, followed by GAC filtration, followed by UV disinfection, and followed by chlorine disinfection. So if you look at each one of the constituents and go from left to right across this graphic, you'll see that there's multiple barriers for every single constituent. And that's exactly what we mean by multi-barrier treatment, as how we're going to go about providing not only exceptionally clean water, but also protecting public health and safety when our system is in operation. Next slide. And again, more than 30 miles of pipeline will connect the communities to the Willamette River supply. This is a photo of actually one of our first sections of pipe. This was the Kinsman pipeline project that Tom alluded to. It was done in partnership with the City of Wilsonville and ODOT. As you can see there, our pipeline is, well, what I can tell you is there, that's a 66-inch welded steel pipeline. That's the material of choice for our transmission mains. All of the joints are welded, and the piping has an epoxy coating, mortar lining, and also cathodic protection. We're intending this system to last decades and designing it and constructing it to do so. Next slide. And then one other major element of the Willamette water supply system are our water storage tanks. And that, as I mentioned, is going to be up on Cooper Mountain. This photo here shows the 2 water storage tanks. This is actually the Joint Water Commission's water storage tanks. These are 20 million gallon tanks, concrete pre-stressed reservoirs built onto Fern Hill Mountain, I believe. And ours will be on Cooper Mountain and will be a little bit smaller in size. Ours will be 15 million gallons. Initial construction, we will build only one of those tanks. The second will be built in some years' time as demands increase. Next slide. So seismic resilience, resilience is in our mission statement, and so it's so seismic resilience is integral to the Willamette water supply system design and construction. And so I've got a few slides here to speak specifically to what we mean by that. The examples I'll share with you are raw water facilities ground improvements, some of our structural design features, and some of our pipeline design features. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the raw water intake if you can kind of see it, at least a bit of it on the photo on the left-hand side here that shows jet grouting. So the square structure kind of in the middle of the facility, middle of the picture there is our raw water pump station. Underground, there's a pipeline that extends out into the river with our fish screens located out there. This is a highly critical facility. We need to have a reliable intake on the Willamette River. If we don't have the intake reliability, it challenges the reliability of the overall system. So we've done a lot of work to improve the seismic reliability and capacity of this system. What we're showing here in this graphic on the left-hand side is jet grouting, on the right-hand side is deep soil mixing. So it's very large equipment. What we're doing there, or what we have accomplished there, is strengthening the soil in the area, mixing the soil in the riverbank with cement to stiffen it and strengthen it so that it doesn't move toward the Willamette River. Our geotechnical analysis and modeling conducted to date showed that as a significant risk, particularly during a future Cascadia subduction zone event. It is likely that a lot of the riverbank along the Willamette River will want to move toward the river. If that were to occur, it would take our intake with it, and we would be out of water. So we spent quite a bit of time, energy, and money, frankly, to stiffen and strengthen the Willamette River bank and make sure that we had a reliable intake facility for exactly that reason. Next slide. Along with that, we also had to make sure that our pump station itself was reliable. The pump station located on top of our caisson. On the left-hand side, you see a 3D model that we built to evaluate the strength of this building during such an event like a Cascadia subduction zone event, and what would happen and would it survive in such an event. And then from that, we were able to determine how to best economically modify that facility so that it was strong enough to withstand such an event. And so the results of that you can see a bit of on the photo on the right-hand side here, where we're adding a lot of reinforcing bar, a lot of reinforcing material. And then on top of that, we'll add a concrete curb basically to strengthen the foundation of this building. And we're also doing significant improvements to the wall structure and also to the roof structure to make sure that it lasts through the earthquake. Next slide, please. As well, our reservoirs kind of in the center of our overall transmission system, critical facilities as well. One of the design features of these types of tanks are seismic cables. And as you see them kind of in a crisscross pattern here, what these cables do is anchor the wall down to the foundation so that even during a sloshing event, during an earthquake, they don't displace and the tank stays whole in such an event. Next slide. And then our pipelines connecting everything together. As I mentioned, we have a single pipeline that connects all of this and connects to our distribution systems. So we have to make sure our pipelines are reliable as well. And it takes various means to do that. In this particular case, I'm showing you a photo on the upper left of the Chicken Creek crossing that's just north of Sherwood. And then the image directly below that is our engineering drawings. The image on the right-hand side is a 3D finite element analysis model of our pipeline. What's happening here is that we're expecting during a major earthquake there to be a lot of land movement. Now, unlike the river bank right there at the raw water facility, where we're improving the soil there to hold that facility in place, We can't do that everywhere. It would just be economically prohibitive. So in some cases, we have to design our pipeline to accommodate the land movement that we're anticipated. It's okay if our pipeline moves, just as long as it can hold pressure and remain in operation following such an event. And that's what we're showing here in our modeling. It provides us the information to make sure that our pipeline is strong enough and will withstand such an event so that we can continue to flow water through it following such an earthquake. Next slide. Another way that we handle this is through flexibility. So pipelines and structures move differently in earthquakes. And so in those particular cases, we need to provide flexibility between those situations. On the right-hand side there, we show a 24-inch, what's called a flex tend at the raw water facility pump station connection. So that's where a pipeline connects into the structure. The structure is very stiff. The pipeline can be flexible. And so we want to have some flexibility between those two locations so that they don't break. They bend, don't break. And that's implemented at various places throughout our transmission main so that we can remain in operational following a major earthquake. Next slide. So the program's been in operation for about 6 years now. So this is a very high level version of what we've completed. We've completed 7 pipeline projects. As Tom mentioned, we secured WIFIA loans. We've received our federal permit and approval of our thermal trading plan. We've continued successful partnerships with not only internally with the TBWD, Beaverton, and Hillsborough, but also with many other governmental agencies. And we are on track for on-time completion in 2026. Looking ahead, and actually right now, more than 500 million of construction projects will be sent to bid for the next in the next 6 months. Very busy time for us. I think I've got one more slide. And it's where is the money gone? So as Tom mentioned, we're spending a lot of money, and we truly are. To date, we've spent about $300 million. One of the things we really like to point out is that a lot of that has stayed local. 92% of it has stayed in local employees, goods, and services. What do we mean by local? What we've defined as local is anything within 50 miles of the activity that we're doing. So we look in the counties in those areas, and if the companies that we're supporting or that are working on our facilities, or this photo right here, this is from Northwest Pipe, which is in North Portland, and has supplied almost all of the transmission pipe on the program to date. So it's something that we're very proud of, that money spent to date. So much of it has stayed local. And so with that concludes my part of the presentation. I'll pass it off to Joel now, I believe. Joel?
Thanks, Dave. I'm going to advance my slides here. Looks like I might have to do it the old way. Hi, everybody. My name is Joel Kerry. I'm the Water Resource Division Manager for Tualatin Valley Water District. A few things that in my role that I'm responsible for and help with a lot of the partnerships that both Dave and Tom mentioned: water quality compliance, regulatory compliance, integration of our new source as Tualatin Valley Water District, and along with the other project partners are evaluating that, and other partnership projects, watershed planning, water rights stewardship, so kind of a whole host of things. So the little graphic on the right-hand side of your screen there, just as a visual representation of the various things. You've probably heard a lot of W acronyms in our presentation today, so that kind of gives you an idea of the various partnerships happening. As Dave mentioned, there's the WIF, which is the Willamette Intake Facilities, and all those various agencies that partake in that and how that relates to WWSS. And then just as another reference point, WRWC, which we won't talk about today, but is a joint partnership agency that holds our water rights on the Willamette. So with that, let's dive into a few details. And just a little disclaimer for the last few slides. We'll try and get through these. I know there's a handful of questions that have popped up, but hopefully this can kind of give you a view of what we're doing right now in this arena and also where we're trying to head with some of our water resource initiatives. So just starting with water quality in our region, a lot of efforts that we're actively engaged in right now and looking ahead to our future. Some of the things that we're actually actively engaged on or our partners are leading on are things like cyanobacterial harmful algal blooms, cyanoHABs. Some of you may have heard of those, just generally referred to as HABs. I mentioned our supply integration planning, making sure that we're evaluating how we actually bring this new source into our systems. The information that Dave shared and Tom started with, again, that whole new supply program, how do we actually bring that water into our systems? to make sure the experience works for that integration for our customers. Lead and copper monitoring, obviously that's been a topic over the last several years that a lot of our customers are well aware of, and clearly it's something we're deeply engaged in our own system. So, and then just a couple things we'll touch upon. Some of the emerging stuff, a lot of things that we see often in the news. So the goal here is to at least explain to you what we've done or what we're tracking in those areas. Sort of the future looking ahead forecast for us. So some current initiatives, efforts that we work on for water quality monitoring, all really intended to make sure we protect public health for our citizens in our community. Mention the cyanohabs. We have active monitoring programs, our Joint Water Commission partnership with City of Hillsborough, staff who actually do the monitoring at the picture representation there of Hag Lake. And then Willamette River intake as well. There is ongoing monitoring at that current intake by the City of Wilsonville. So those are efforts that we're actively engaged in. A host of us are actually currently working and have been working for the last several years on supporting a national research initiative about helping develop predictive tools for the formation of cyanohabs. Just an example of one of the things that we're actively doing right now, but is obviously intended to give us tools to look at the future and whether or not we could see those conditions forming, so we have a chance to better respond. So, and then we'll touch on it here at the end of my slide presentation or my slide deck. Just some legislative items that we've worked on. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the WWSS integration. We've been planning this for quite some time, how to integrate this new source into our system going back to 2018. We've been evaluating things like compatibility of chemistry, how operations are going to work when we actually bring these new sources in for all the owners' systems, and identifying any of those risks that we know of, potential risks we might see. You know, I call this the no stone unturned effort. Really, we're taking a very deep dive into making sure that we identify exactly how we do this and exactly what we need to be paying attention to now and as we do it and as we've actually integrated these new supplies. So that should be wrapped up, at least the final plan coming this following year. So, and again, last on just some of these efforts, the lead and copper item that I mentioned, you know, there is new EPA rules that have been brought forth this last year that we're actively tracking and monitoring and engaged with. Well in advance of this last year, we were watching what was happening with that, and part of that effort was making sure that our new treatment plant, the one that Dave outlined, has provisions, has the necessary equipment, tools, processes in place to make sure that we're meeting that objective and making sure that we're doing our part on our end to help reduce corrosivity of water. So, and again, just overall working with our supply partners on the lead and copper issue right now. When I say supply partners, I mean our regional agencies, including regulatory agencies of the state, Oregon Health Authority, active engagement on all fronts to make sure that we are truly making sure we're collaborating on how to address this issue now and for the future. So a couple of things we'll talk about here, just the future of stuff we're looking at. So this is a particular topic I know a lot of folks probably have seen in the news in recent months and years, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS. Now you probably know why we use a lot of acronyms in our industry. There's a whole host of these particular compounds that fall in that category, dozens and dozens of these. And as the note points out there, they've been in widespread use for quite some time, which is often why they get referred to as forever chemicals. So a little bit of quick background, not going to go into too much detail, but just I hope this gives some context for why these particular compounds are something that our industry is actively tracking and engaged with. As that picture on the right explains, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, have a carbon chain with a fluorine element attached. That particular bond, as you'll see there in that picture, it forms one of the strongest bonds in nature. What that translates to is they're incredibly slow to break down in the environment, or frankly destroy for that matter. So that it goes back to that point of why they're called forever chemicals. Two of the most common ones we talk about a lot, you might hear a lot in the news, PFOA or PFOS, perfluorooctanoic acid or perfluorooctane sulfonate. Those are the common ones that we see often. Again, there's dozens of these right now, but those are ones because of their ubiquitous in testing, we often focus on those as kind of a surrogate. So there's historical sources of these compounds: firefighting foams, non-stick cookware, your clothing. The one we always point out are things like water repellent finishes on outdoor clothing, non-iron clothing as well that's wrinkle resistant, all those things, and food packaging as well. Food packaging, when you get that kind of slippery surface, they are so widely used. That is why they're so widespread and why it's become an issue across the country and pretty prevalent in some regions. So what about PFAS in Oregon? Well, during 2013 to 2015 sampling period, through a national sampling requirement under the EPA, there were over 2,500 water systems in the state of Oregon that collected samples for PFAS. So PFAS were not detected in any of those sources during that period, including the sources we've talked about today, JWC and the Willamette source. Furthermore, just to add to that, the Portland source, which TVWD receives right now as well. And looking ahead, we are going to be doing the sampling again in 2023, 2025, notably with much lower detection limits. So one thing just to point out about this particular area of focus, again, we've done the sampling before, but knowing that we're going to be doing it again in the future with these lower detection limits, the benefit we get under this national framework is that as a region, we get to do this sampling together for a lot of our sources. That way we have some additional context about what may be happening. So occurrence rates in the past that we've seen under this prior sampling protocol indicated again that we didn't have any detections, nor was it the same risk factors associated with it as other parts of the country that we often see. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to keep looking. And again, the benefit we get of doing this under that regional approach, under that federal framework, is that it helps us really see the context of what's happening in our region, not just individual sources, which oftentimes can lead to more questions given the nature of these compounds and how prevalent they may be from human-derived sources. So something else to note, Dave did mention this in his presentation as well about treatment capacity or capability at our treatment plant. So treatment methods for PFAS, there are a variety of them out there. One specifically that we have at the plant is what's called GAC, granular activated carbon filtration. That is adsorption via activated carbon. Through that process, through the media, and what example picture there shows is the filter beds. Limitations do exist to this technology. It's not to say that this is easy or completely foolproof, but nonetheless, the point of it being that there are capabilities and technologies we have, as Dave pointed out, the multi-barrier approach. These are things that we've looked at. These are things that we made sure were available in our tool belt to make sure that as we look at the future, what we may be testing for, what may be these emerging contaminants, that there are options for our system to address and deal with these things. So again, the point of that bullet point there is that you may have to replace some of the media more frequently, but again, there are options there for us to evaluate if these ever become an issue in our region. And again, just stressing the point that again, they're so derived from human activities that oftentimes it really is rely on us as consumers, if we can, to try and make sure we minimize the use of these compounds. So another area of interest that we often see in the news, and that our industry and our staff and we're looking at, we've been tracking it. In fact, there's some conferences coming up in the next 2 weeks that we'll be attending. It's microplastics. So current state of understanding and what we see in the future, just a few points here to highlight. The research related to drinking water is still quite limited. That middle picture there is very interesting. Obviously, you'll note that's definitely not Portland or Washington County. But one thing that we've learned so far, and just nationally and quite frankly internationally, is that occurrence of how you actually understand the rate of occurrence of these is based on sampling techniques. So do you sample at the surface? Do you sample in the water column? I mean, these are some of the things that can give you wildly varying results of what types of risks you might be seeing from these from microplastics. So as the middle picture gives you an example of. So there's still a lot of epidemiological work that needs to be done about long-term health impacts. Treatment options that we understand so far is based largely on the current understanding. As we just talked about, particulate size makes a difference in what we're talking about. The example picture on your left there gives you an example of the different types or different ranges of sizes of these structures you might actually see, ranging from microplastics down to some of the newer terminology, which is nanoplastics. So again, we're tracking this research. You know, our friends to the south have actually actively begun legislation over the next several years to help inform the testing methodology behind it. Again, just mention that because oftentimes that can lead the way for some of the national framework and states that, you know, adjacent to states like California. So summary of this one is we are keeping track of this, we are monitoring it, and we are watching the current state of research to make sure we understand exactly where we need to go. Just shifting gears a little bit, so really trying to talk about how all the elements that our new supply program that Dave mentioned, some of these elements, investments that Tom brought up, like what are we doing to protect these investments for the long run? Well, one of the big ones we're doing is watershed planning activities, and we have started these efforts now to plan for the future. So one of the things that we just completed this last year through the Willamette Intake Facilities Commission was we adopted our strategic plan, which is titled the Mission, Vision, Values, and Goals. Our staff are actually going to post a link to that in the chat so you can see it and take a look at it. This is effectively the roadmap for how these agencies together define our regional role in water supply stewardship, watershed planning, etc. And then the other effort on top of that, that's actually just started as a result of finishing that strategic plan, is our watershed protection, monitoring, and outreach plan. So this is a multi-year project based on that strategic plan, the mission, vision, values, goals, which includes several really important elements that we wanted to touch on right now, which is prioritizing those risks in our watershed for the mid-Willamette and beyond. This plan is focusing right now on those river miles upstream of our intake, but more broadly, just the basin in general. Just what are those areas of engagement we need to be at? What strategic partnerships do we need to leverage? You know, this is a big basin. We cannot nor should we be doing this alone, clearly. So this is really about how we develop these partnerships further across the basin, looking at what we can do and how we can invest those resources effectively. So, and last but certainly not least on there is part of this plan is addressing climate change risks. So, you know, the long-term planning we put into this system, the seismic resiliency, wouldn't be complete without us looking at the bigger picture of what climate change means for this particular source, and how we can develop a plan that's proactive and engaged at the right levels. So another arena that we operate in is water supply stewardship. Our mission, vision, values, goals really helps define our approach. There's a lot of elements to this. We could probably spend a lot more time with some of these slides, but in the interest of time, just a few highlights about really what we've been engaged with and where we're going with this work. You know, we've done and continue through our partnerships to do a lot of proactive regional engagement. Example picture there of engagement with the United States Corps of Engineers on issues related to stored water behind those dams, in collaboration with key stakeholder groups across the region about the use of water in the basin in general and how we develop those partnerships for the future of this region. You know, just to highlight the fact that we are dedicated to responsible management of these resources through our water rights permits, through engagement with the Water Resource Department at the state level, and effective operational planning. That's a fantastic picture. Dave noted it in some of his conversation or his presentation. Those are our new intake screens that were just installed this last month, specifically designed to increase capacity while protecting spawning fish, salmonoid, making sure that we do our part to responsibly manage that resource on all fronts. As we talk about often, you know, this in the world of water rights, you know, we look at multiple aspects of this, not just our own water supply needs, but how do we protect the resources out there, including those other stakeholders. I'll use that term broadly, but that includes our aquatic species. How do we look at this to make sure that we're addressing all this and using science and data to make the best decisions possible? So a lot of that kind of gets the point across of these are the things that we're actively engaged with and looking at the future of. And last, but certainly not least, again, on this particular item is our legislative engagement. So This is an area that we've been active in and continue to be active in. This isn't just my role. However, there's a lot of additional efforts that happen at our partnerships, a lot of additional efforts that happen through staff around these agencies. Our goal is to make sure we provide input to help our region. To our legislative members, we've been actively involved in things like the Harmful Algal Blooms Work Group, which was convened by the House Committee on Water. We've provided testimony through these affiliations on the 2020 wildfire impacts of the water sector, trying to make sure that, while maybe it doesn't seem as obvious for some regions like Washington County, but we do have those impacts with some of our other sources, including Joint Water Commission. And just overall, how does that look in this? How might that impact the state and our drinking water? I just to spend 10 seconds on that one. One particular point we want to really make clear is, despite everything, our water supply operations go 24/7. So that's really one key element we want to get at with some of our engagement on that issue is, we oftentimes don't have the luxury, nor should we. We make sure that our water goes 24/7, despite all the risks that come flying at us. So, and it's an immense point of pride with a lot of our operations and elected officials about how we go about this. So, in that arena, advocating for infrastructure needs, and as I just noted, really trying to make sure we're continuing to advocate for water rights and water resource priorities across the basin. These efforts are going to continue. This is a really big part of our engagement to make sure that we're actively involved for our region and making sure we help guide the policy decisions at the highest level of the state. So with that kind of concludes my portion of it. So it's question and answer time. I'm going to hand it back over to Andrea and the rest of the communications team so they can field these questions to those of us on the call, as well as our other subject matter experts from our other partnerships.
Again, I think an important thing for us to emphasize is all of this is made possible with partners. And we are fortunate today to have Nikki Iverson joining us from the City of Hillsborough Water. And Chad Lynn, our two big partners on the Willamette Water Supply Program. We also have Delora Kerber and Nick Westendorf. Delora's from the City of Wilsonville and Nick's from the City of Tualatin, as well as Rob Murchison from the City of Tigard and Craig Sheldon from the City of Sherwood. Of water company, a bright partnerships to create better outcomes, and they make more strategic investments for our customers all through the basin. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Justin, who's going to moderate the questions and answers. And as a reminder, we do end these at the end. If your question is during our hang up, we'll stay with you until you're done. But we know people signed on to stay till 1. So that little thought bubble up there is where we want to hear from you. And we'll turn it over to you, Justin. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Andrea, and happy to be with everyone today. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy day today to spend a little bit of it with us. Just a heads up, Joel and Tom, we've got a lot of great questions here, and a lot of them are going to be for the two of you, starting with the first one, which reads as, what are the rules around a homeowner catchment system for a few 50G barrels to collect rainwater on property? Are these allowed? Joel, let's send that one over to you and kick off the Q&A.
Great, thanks, Justin. Sort of a short answer, but 2 parts to that. Yes, they are allowed. What we would say are 2 things about that. It's always important to make sure you have that permitted if you are doing plumbing work around your house. Anything that connects at that point more broadly to your internal water system. If it's just rain barrels, it really depends on how you set those up. If it's not connected to that plumbing specifically within your home, we as a district still want to know that. Part of the rules we have around that, depending on how it might be connected, would be water quality protection at the meter. That's what we call cross connection control. So it could be a backflow prevention device. Much like a lot of the responses, we'd say reach out to your agency, your jurisdiction, and ask those questions. They can help guide you through the process with that. So Important to make sure that ultimately our goal is to protect public health, protect our water supply for your neighbors, and frankly for your home as well too. Just some of these things do present risk internally within the home, so that's really a twofold goal for all that.
Thanks so much, Joel. And we'll move to Tom for the next question. This comes from a customer named Lee. Are acts of terror, however unlikely, also a risk TVWD plans for?
Great question. Yes, we don't provide a lot of details on this simply because we don't want to give ideas. And what I will say is that we have security at all of our facilities. We have a lot of cybersecurity systems in place. In fact, recently attended a conference where cybersecurity was a big topic of discussion, and the risk it's posing now and what it looks like in the future, and looked at all of their best management practices, what they're recommending for entities like us to do. It was nice to realize that we've implemented almost all of them already. So we are ahead of the curve in protecting our systems. And it's something we continually watch for in every aspect and look for new technology to help us mitigate that risk.
Thanks, Tom. And we're going to stick with you for the next one. This comes from a customer named Abraham, who writes, what is being done to keep water and sewer rates as low as possible? Why is the base rate so high even if we use no water and no sewer? How does that incentivize or incentive conservation? Excuse me there.
Yeah, that's a big question. So we do all we can to keep your water rates as low as we possibly can. And that is something we do by, we bring our budget every other year. We do a biennial budget. We have a budget committee, and then we have our board, and we present everything we're looking at, what we are looking at doing, how we're looking at spending money over the biennium. That is reviewed by the budget committee, and it's reviewed by our board. The board ultimately takes into consideration what the budget committee members have said, as well as what staff has said for what our needs are. They make appropriate decisions in terms of adopting that, and then we execute on that budget. I want to point out that we have no control as TVWD. We have no control over sewer rates. That is a different entity, Clean Water Services. And I can tell you we're in conversation with them at multiple levels. I am in conversation with their CEO all the time. This is something that they also take very seriously and look at trying to keep those rates as low as possible, because we certainly understand the impact that they have. Having said that, we actually in this biennium, we have budgeted for doing a new rate study to look at the very issue that you're bringing up, is the base rate. It gets really complicated. There's entire books written on this that we have a phenomenal CFO, Paul Matthews, who's a leading industry expert on this. But what I will tell you is that we will be looking at what the proper balance is between that fixed rate and a volume rate. One of the things with operating a water system, our fixed rates don't change a lot. So in other words, especially with like this Willamette project, if you take a look at that, we're going to have fixed loan amounts that we are loan payments that we're going to have to make for the next 35 years. So regardless of what our water use is or anybody's water use is, we still have to make those payments. So we have to make sure that we're collecting a sufficient base rate to pay back those loans. So there's a balance there in what we have on the fixed rate side versus on the volume rate side. So, but stay tuned. There'll be more coming on that probably in about a year or so when we start moving down the road on doing the rate study.
Thanks, Tom. And we're going to jump over to Joel for the next question and potentially a little extra answer from Dave. This is from a customer named John who writes, are the rights holders water for the Willamette River published somewhere? Are there issues at present with the amount of water available with competing interests?
So two-part question there. So the first part, are they published somewhere? So they are publicly available through the Oregon Water Resources Department. If you look them up, they have a lookup tool, we'll call it, website. You can find them there. That's largely because they are, administered, administered meaning like issued by the Oregon Water Resources Department. So that's one way. And frankly, if you contact any of us, we're happy to have that conversation too. If there's other details you want to know. So the second part of that, are there current issues, competing interests right now? The short answer is no, but that goes back to that slide. The longer answer is a little bit more nuanced and complicated, which is just because we know right now that the amount that we're taking is such a small percentage of the total flow. That doesn't mean we're ignoring some of the other aspects of why we want to be good stewards of that. So not talked about here in a much longer conversation is we actually have initiatives and things already occurring related to the use of that intake. So thermal trading plan, looking at how those temperatures might impact downstream. And that plan is actually administered through DEQ right now. So that's one way we're looking at that. The other way that we're looking at that is what I mentioned too, just coordination with a lot of larger projects in the basin, like the Corps of Engineers, how we can look at access to that stored water to help mitigate some of these, not just our municipal flow, but just in general, how does that all work together? So it's a much more nuanced, there's a lot more response to that. So I hope that at least gets at the question. But again, if there's other stuff or other details that you're interested in, reach out to any of us. We would love to have those conversations in greater detail.
Thanks, Joel. And this next one is going to go back to Tom. Customer writes to us, you showed a picture of Mount Hood in your intro. How is the government camp water company related to what you're doing right now?
Good question. I believe that picture was of a Bull Run Lake. We get our water from the Portland, not all of our water, but a good portion of our water currently from the Portland Water Bureau. And so that was the point of that picture. It's one of our sources of water that we get, and we don't, as far as that, I'm sorry, the Mount Hood entity that you mentioned, we don't have anything to do with that.
Thanks, Tom. And we're going to jump back over to Joel. We got a little bit of a pattern going here. This question, again, is from customer named Lee. Considering that the Wilsonville facility is downstream of more southern Willamette Valley population centers such as Salem, how might their uses of the river impact operation of our system?
So two parts here. Dave alluded to it. There's been an extensive amount of effort already done with water quality in the basin and in that portion of the Willamette River, which is why we chose that source. Second part, meaning that we know it's already a high quality source based on that extensive amount of analysis, and frankly, Wilsonville's use of that for the last, over 15 years now. Second part to that, which is, how might those operations affect our operations? That's part of one of our current efforts underway with the WIF Commission, that shared intake. How do we plan for any type of event? Whether it just be supply related or any kind of potential adverse water quality that we might see. None of us have a crystal ball, but what we try and do is just plan and do our best to identify those risks that might show up. With those downstream agencies, users, we're looking at things like time of travel in the river based on time of year. What are those highest risks? And that's really landing in that watershed protection watershed protection monitoring and outreach plan. So that is going to be our effort over the next several years to really sit down and validate some of our assumptions, make sure we're not missing things, really gather a group of subject matter experts across the region, not just us, but some of our own teams that we work with often, to make sure that we really do prioritize those risks and work with those regional partnerships to make sure that those communication lines are very open. So more to come on that. Please stay engaged on that. It's a great question, and it's something that we're actively really thinking hard about right now.
Thanks, Joel. And this next question will be a combination of Tom and you again, Joel. Customer writes in, are you considering removing fluoride from your water system like Hillsborough does?
So I'll start out, and then so what I'll say on this is the short answer is we're not considering removing it. So this is a policy decision that was made many years ago by our board. I believe they took quite a bit of input on this when they made this decision. So we will continue to add fluoride, but we realize that there's different opinions on this. I certainly don't want to answer for Hillsborough what they are planning on doing. I saw that there's a question later on here related to this issue, and I certainly would let Hillsborough answer for themselves on their approach and their views. But the shorter answer is we're not going to be removing fluoride from Tualatin Valley Water District's system. We'll be continuing to add that. Joel, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Just a super quick point of clarification. As Tom points out, our board sets policy and direction. The vote for fluoride goes back even a little bit further beyond that. Actually, it was 1963 that the citizens at the time of the water district voted to have it included or added to their system. There's a reason why. So TVWD, a portion of our system is not fluoridated. That's the portion we supply down by Metzger. Again, it was really driven by a vote of the public, and that's why a portion of our system is not, because it was at one point a different water system. So a lot of that information is available online on our website, just to make it clear. And exactly as Tom points out, there's no current plans unless there's initiative by the citizens to make to go that route. So all I will add to that is just to say that we take a lot of effort and care to try and make sure that we do that in accordance with public health guidelines, U.S. public health guidelines, Oregon Health Authority, adding sodium fluoride to our system at the right level, which is 0.7 milligrams per liter. So, thanks.
Thanks, Joel. And Andrea has added in the chat a link to more information on the parts of our district that do and do not get water that is fluoridated. So that's in the chat for anyone who wants to check it out as well. And we're going to stick again with you, Joel, for the next question from Dean, who writes, is TVWD partnering with the Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District for urban water conservation and rural watershed planning above the Tualatin River facility?
Directly, no. Indirectly, that's what we work with our Joint Water Commission partnership through. So as a member of the Joint Water Commission with Hillsborough staff that lead a lot of those efforts, the more nuanced answer might be yes. But again, it's largely through those partnerships. It's not as a direct link of TVWD. But yeah, that partnership with Tualatin. With the Tualatin Soil Water Conservation District and active engagement is something that we've done through that partnership on various projects over the last several years as well.
Thank you. And Tom, we're going to go over to you for this next one. Customer writes in, could you please explain what services TVWD provides versus the other service provider I pay, parentheses, Raleigh Hills Water District? Thanks.
Yeah, so there's actually quite a few water providers in the region in Washington County. While Raleigh Hills is one of them, and so to tell you what services they provide different from ours is really difficult for me to do. There are some basics that we all have to comply with in terms of water quality. And doing our water supply planning. All of those things are very similar. Their source of water is from Portland Water Bureau. They are a much smaller system than what we are, Tualatin Valley Water District is. But in terms of what specifics, how are they planning for replacement, anything like that is really difficult for me to answer. Their situation is different because they are somewhat surrounded between us and Beaverton and West Slope. So they're not facing, I think, some of the future growth challenges that maybe we are and many of our partners are.
Awesome, thank you. And for the next question, I'd like to call on one of our partner agencies, Nikki Iverson with the City of Hillsborough. This question is for you. It comes from someone named Kathy who writes, think you'll ever be able to convince Hillsborough to add the fluoride that you do, you as in TVWD?
Yeah, I'm just going to add that to the chat, but I can just jump in. Adding fluoride to drinking water in the city of Hillsborough continues to be a community-based decision. There were 2 votes that occurred. I believe one was in the 1960s and one was in the 1970s. And by a pretty large majority, the community decided they did not want to add fluoride to the system. Our position is it still continues to be a community-based decision. And if the community would like to add fluoride and request a vote of the community, would have to be driven by our citizens and customers. We as a system are open to the decision, but we would like our community to really drive that policy decision based on the previous votes fired. And that's really all I have on that one. Is that the only question, Justin?
Yes, it is, Nikki. Thanks so much for jumping in.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And we've got, it looks like one last question. Tom, this will be for you, but before we get there, just a reminder to folks, now is a great time to write any questions into the chat that you have. We're getting toward the end of the list here. So Tom, we'll leave this last one for you. It's mostly a comment from Stan, who writes, Dave Kraska used the city of Wilsonville and Sherwood as proof of how safe it is to use treated water from the mid-Willamette River as our new drinking water. This is a quote, trust me statement, because there is nothing really available for the public to review. Wilsonville residents have been, quote, guinea pigs for years now, but it is not obvious that qualified analysis have tackled this challenge for public use.
Well, first off, hi Stan, and thank you for your tough question. What I can say is that, we do all, whether it's City of Wilsonville or Sherwood or Tualatin Valley Water District, we all have to comply with certain testing requirements and testing parameters. I don't want to speak for City of Wilsonville or Sherwood, but I can assure you they take their delivery of safe drinking water, they take it as seriously as we do. So I don't think they see that they're treating their customers any differently than ours. We would never use our customers as guinea pigs. We make sure that our water meets the highest standards. And I can tell you that I believe Wilsonville and Sherwood feels the same about that. We are looking at emerging contaminants to make sure that we're in a position to address those with new technologies or with existing technologies to make sure that far into the future we can continue to provide safe drinking water regardless of what contaminants or risks we face. I would like to give our partners an opportunity to respond to Stan. So Delora or Craig, if either of you wanted to add anything to that, I would welcome that.
We're fortunate enough to have Delora joining us via phone. So if she does want to respond, she'll be typing her answer in. And if anyone from the city of Sherwood would like to speak, you can unmute yourself or let us know and we'll get you to answer.
I think we can keep rolling here. Not hearing anything from them, but
Okay, well, I did
it-
get one last question. It's not
Yeah.
related to that, but it's a follow-up to the Raleigh Hills question. And that is the person's wanting to know why they're being served by both districts, Tualatin Valley Water and Raleigh Hills. I don't know if anybody wants to take that, but I think unless they have properties in both, they wouldn't be receiving water from both.
But my guess, Andrea, and I'm not entirely sure on this, but I would guess that you're getting a bill from us for that. We bill for clean water services for sewer. So you might be getting we do all the billing for clean water services. So you might be getting a bill from Tualatin Valley Water District that is actually on behalf of a partner agency, Clean Water Services, for their sewer services, and then Raleigh Hills is charging you for drinking water. So that might explain it. I'm not entirely certain on that, but I believe that's the case.
Okay, well, we'll let you know in the chat too how to reach us outside of this event. But I think that's it for the new questions that have come in. So we're going to call it a wrap for today. If you want to close, Tom, we just really want to thank you again for spending your time with us this afternoon.
Yeah, I did want to acknowledge, has anyone contributed from City of Beaverton? And I do believe we had some folks on from the City of Beaverton. I can tell you we work with them closely, as well as our partners do, to make sure that we are really looking at water supply from a regional perspective. And so we all work very closely together to make sure that we are providing the region with a safe, reliable supply that we can count on, even with all the risks and challenges we face. So with that, I would like to say thank you to those that attended today. I really do appreciate your interest. It's important that we are responding to our customers and the concerns and questions you have. We are always excited to share what we are doing and how we are delivering this water to you. I also want to thank our partners that joined us on this call today. They are very important to us and making sure that we work together as a region, and that we are realizing that there's similar concerns that our customers have. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone. I don't know, I see our Commissioner Doan. I don't know, Jim, if you would like to add something, but if you would, I invite you.
I just want to, on behalf of the board, thank the staff and our partners for this really informative discussion. It certainly touched on things that I never would have considered. And again, I really appreciate the depth of knowledge that the district has and that our partners have too. Thank you very much on behalf of the board.
And with that, thank you. And we appreciate it. And we have another Talking Water on Thursday. So this one is preparing how to prepare your irrigation system. So please sign up for that if you haven't. And we'll be doing a presentation on that Thursday. And then I'm not sure when the next one is, but please be on the lookout for it. We do posts to let everybody aware. And Joel, I see your face, so I don't know if you wanted to add something. Okay. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you all.